Hi everyone, it's QuickyBaby and welcome back to World of Tanks, and today I'm playing in the Emil II. This is a tier 9 Swedish heavy tank that until recently was probably the best tier 9 heavy inside the game. However, in a recent patch, Wargaming nerfed all of the Swedish auto-loading heavy tanks. I think apart from the tier 8, but that one wasn't exactly performing as well as the tier 9 and the tier 10 were. What did Wargaming do to the Emil II, to be specific? Well, firstly, they absolutely annihilated this vehicle's damage per minute from 2,558 down to 2,200, and that is because they added 5 seconds to the tank's reload. And when you're only reloading 3 shells, 5 seconds is a substantial amount of extra time to have to pay, reloading in 30 seconds instead of 25. This definitely stops the vehicle from being that wild DPM tank that can kind of fire 3 at you as you're trying to approach it, and then fall back, reload quickly, and be able to dump out another 3 rounds. In addition, Wargaming nerfed the accuracy from 0.38, which is not great but not bad, down to 0.42, which is pretty horrendous, and will leave quite a lot of people wanting to use accuracy devices for the first time on their Swedish heavy tanks, rather than just whacking on vertical stabilizers and letting the gun roar. And in addition to that, Wargaming nerfed the gun handling when you're turning the turret from 0.12 to 0.18, basically adding 50% extra dispersion to when you turn the turret on this tank, meaning that when you're on a ridgeline and you want to turn and quickly re-engage vehicles, not only are you less accurate, your gun is also blooming out more as you're doing that, which really stops this tank from being that reactionary nuker on a ridgeline. And so the Emil II, definitely not in the same form as it was in its glory days with regards to its firepower, but one thing that's even more brutal about this tank is, of course, its mobility, and we've seen just how slow it is compared to what it used to be. One thing that this tank can still do, look at this is a Skoda T56, the most overpowered autoloader at tier 8, and he just got absolutely evaporated. So much so that this Oni, I think, just blinked and realized, hey guys, we're pushing, right? We're pushing. I've got a Skoda T56 behind me. We're going to be A-OK. No, unfortunately, you're not going to be A-OK. And I was making this bottom tier medium very useful right now, pushing the Panther around a little bit to be able to go Hulldown on the back of their vehicle or even on their front of their vehicle. And that is really what these vehicles were always good for and still are very good for, being hull down monsters. This thick turret armor on this vehicle, 215 at the front of very well angled turret armor, will only get challenged by the highest of premium rounds fired by usually tank destroyers, or I guess some Clan Wars reward tanks, or even, you know, just regular reward vehicles now, like the M60 and the 121B with their 350 heat pen. And so this is why these tanks were always toxic. And it's kind of interesting in a way, because Wargaming have nerfed the vehicles, clearly, including a top speed nerf down to 40 kilometers an hour of this vehicle, whereas previously it was 56, and a reverse speed going down to 12 from 18. It was a real heavy-handed slap to the Swedish heavy tanks. However, they can still do this. They can basically just sit, hold down, and just completely create a stalemate. And while I'm trying to hit the mantlet here of the CC56, which is actually the weakest part of the vehicle, of course now the nerfed accuracy on this tank makes it incredibly hard to do so. And oh, nice shot there by the CC56. I feel bad taking damage from a tank 2 tiers lower, but I was locking my turret as I was turning that Panther, and in retrospect that was a bit of a misplay, because as soon as you do give your opponents the side, the eagle-eyed CC56 on the enemy team manages to shut us down. And this is kind of just what World of Tanks is becoming. And look, I've said this before, and I'm going to say it again. This hold down, sit in the open meta, and just create a stalemate and hope that your opponents make mistakes against you, I guess a bit like the Oni and the Skoda T56, it is just that. It is really stale. And this Peter has got himself into a really good position, but made a horrendous misplay there. Maybe they have no idea what an Emil II is and didn't expect it to fire so quickly. Greedy little tier 7 medium tank in the perfect position to annoy their Swedish tank god on the enemy team in this top tier matchup. Just threw away a wonderful position that they could have harassed me from. And the C75, I'm not sure if they fell down that slope on purpose or if they just decided that they'd had enough of this boring game. And I can completely understand that. Quite often, when I've been playing this game for albeit a little bit too much time, when I'm in the middle of one of those, or even towards the end of one of those 12-hour streams, I just end up getting into this situation of, why do I even play this game when the meta has just evolved into this? It's actually got to the stage where I can't believe I'm saying this, but I'd like there to actually be artillery in at least one artillery in most games I play, just to be able to kind of speed it up a little bit, and to kind of punish people for sitting in positions like this. Previously, Hulldown monsters, like the Swedish heavies, got punished for any kind of scenario that they found themselves in. Because artillery would just dump them on a ridgeline. Now, I'm not sure if it's the same for you, but at least on the European server recently, I see more games without artillery than I see games with artillery. And when I do, unless it's just Wargaming just trolling you and throwing up to 3 inside a single matchup, because I don't know, everyone just comes online when they get home from work, or maybe while they're actually working because they only have to play one-handed, and then suddenly sign up in all of their artillery and they suddenly get into the same games as you. Maybe possibly, maybe I'm being a little bit unfair. But really, there are so many tanks now with so few weak points that can just sit in positions like this down corridor maps. And look, I kind of like Outpost. I think it's probably one of my preferred maps at the moment. I feel like it's got a lot of different opportunities for a lot of different tank types. So Wargaming, big thumbs up to you, at least in my opinion, for Outpost. I think it's a fun map, and I've been having some really close and really awesome games on this map recently. But still, you end up in these kind of situations where nobody wants to advance, and you see all of the tanks that have actually tried to attack in these scenarios have died. And it's just a case of how... When you're trying to win the majority of your battles, as I hope everybody is trying to do, you can't win the majority of your battles if you just sit and you don't try to win the flank. Because 50% of the time, unfortunately, your team is most likely to lose the other flank. And so you're not going to win more than, say, I don't know, 52, 55% of your battles if you play like that, because you'll have to not only hold your flank, but also be able to deal with the other. And again, the aggressor gets punished against the Hulldown monster sitting in a position like this. And that was a huge shot there. By removing the Tier 9 American heavy tank that we locked eyes with at the start of this battle, that means that now I don't have to worry about any shots from the center of this map anymore, and maybe it will even allow the CC Mark II to be able to progress. Darn, do you see how slow the Emil II is now? Now sure, I don't have all of the field mods quite yet, but I am using a turbo on this tank. It's so darn slow backwards, and it really has massively affected the mobility as well as also the firepower of this vehicle, and I think quite rightly so, because I don't think anyone thought the Emil II or the Kranvang was very balanced, especially seeing what it was doing in ranked. And now I barely see them apart from maybe on 1 or 2 maps in the current most competitive game of Onslaught. Alright, so we're going to come around the corner, and unfortunately, even with vertical stabilizers, our gun handling is still not good enough to be able to hit the TNH 105-1000. And with 2 shells left, I'm kind of worried about this scenario. If I fire 1 at the TNH, I won't have 2 to be able to deal with the SMV-CC56, but I feel like I'm also going to get my shots in now. Now, I think that CC56 was maybe a little bit too bold there. It looks like they've also not been counting my shots, or maybe they just don't have the autoloader on that tank yet. Or is the gun that deals 320 damage an autoloader? I don't think there's a single shotgun that is actually able to do 320. Or maybe, for all I know, he's reloading as well, and we're just in an awkward autoloader standoff. Alright, so we're now in a precarious situation. It's a 3 versus 5 scenario. We've picked up 4 kills ourselves, but there are still 4 tanks. Well, I'll make that 4 tanks now remaining left on the enemy team that we're going to have to deal with, seeing how the Super Hellcat just managed to finish off the TNH 105-1000. And as I said, these vehicles are still the god of a ridgeline, so we're going to make use of that 12 degrees of gun depression here to get above our other ridgeline opposition. And you know what? I have to give big respect to this SMV CC56 for making this game so darn challenging for me. They're a bottom tier tank destroyer sitting opposite me, being really annoying, but well, what goes around comes around. Don't get below a Swedish heavy tank. That it should be written in the rules of World of Tanks. And unfortunately, they became Anakin, and we have clearly performed our role as Obi-Wan there on the high ground of that scenario. But no, seriously, well done to that player for making my life a living hell in a vehicle that was 2 tiers lower. Although, they were probably able to do that because it's crazy that there are now tier 7 tank destroyers in the game that can be Hulldown monstrosities as well, and the fact that there's no arty. Alright, so pretty ugly situation here. 2,000 hit points against 1,300, and most of that is on a glass cannon TD that could die in a single shot. Talking about glass cannon TDs that could die in a single shot, the SU-130 PM lurches towards the Super Hellcat. We managed to finish them off, and now that the Object 704 whiffs at our turret, that means that I will hopefully be able to deliver our 2 extra rounds while they're reloading, and then safely scurry my way back down this little alleyway. And now we've totally put ourselves back into this game, and in fact, now we're ahead of our opponents on hit points as the E-75 arrives mortally wounded and now a one-shot for me. And now securing our top gun against the SU-130 PM and putting the 704 down to a one-shot. I was asking this Super Hellcat to fall back to try and look after their hit points, but they're trying to trade blows with an E-75. I just need a few seconds more, even with this ultra slow reverse speed, to hopefully get into position. And big moment here. Will we clap? Yes, we will. Took the chance right into the lower plate. 7 kills to our name, 5,500 damage, and now in a 2 versus 1. And I'm going to say, Hellcat, can you tank a shot for me? And that's because the Hellcat has 800 hit points. So at least 6 or 7 times out of 10, the Object 704 with their 750 alpha damage is not going to roll high enough to be able to finish them off. And I'm worried that the Hellcat, if I manage to get myself killed, is not going to be able to deal with the 704. However, I see what the Super Hellcat is planning, and clearly when they want to try and flank the 704 and get up behind them, and they're using their very quick tank destroyer to be able to do so, but the 704 is not going to wait to flank as they are going to push forwards, and once again, they just don't respect these tanks on a ridgeline, do they? What are they doing? It's almost as if everyone forgot what these Swedish tanks are capable of, and just because they've been nerfed and just because you're not seeing them in every single one of your battles now doesn't mean that you should not respect the Swede. This thing, it's gone from being the all-purpose bomb it around the map, be hyper-aggressive with incredible DPM and incredible gun handling, as well as also fairly okay accuracy, to now just being a bit of a bore. And I totally understand why less people are playing this tank now. Not everybody wants to just play competitive vehicles, it's not what I'm suggesting, but what I'm saying is that Wargaming have nerfed so many of these statistics that while it's still probably the best thing on a ridgeline, it's just so dull to play around him, and it's so frustrating with the gun with the long reload and the gun handling as well. It's no wonder that these things they've gone pretty much from being so in meta to just being so out of meta. But I, for one, also think it was a good idea. I think that maybe Wargaming nerfed them just a little bit too much, but I'm really happy that they did, because this was a toxic Hulldown meta tank. And anything that Wargaming can do to try and change that toxic Hulldown meta to be more of an opportunity with actual weak points and possibilities to be able to outshoot your opponents rather than just have to sit in front of them and do nothing. And that meta has pushed me so far recently that I'm actually kind of wanting artillery back in the game. At least one of them in a battle, just to be able to punish people who truly want to sit out in the open in these Hulldown God tier tanks. So an ace tanker here for our Emil II, 1,514 base experience. We got a high caliber for the near 6,000 damage that we dealt, and a steel wall as well for blocking 1,900 hit points, and a Radley Walters medal for destroying over half of the enemy team. And because I didn't fire that many gold rounds, at least in this battle, we make a cool 10,000 credit profit as well. So the Emil II, and also all of the Swedish heavy tanks, Wargaming can probably put out the biggest nerf, I think, in World of Tanks history, but it's not enough to be able to slay the god of the ridgeline and replace it at least with something else, at least its entirety. And so if you've thought, are the Swedish heavy tanks still worth it? They're not the go-to pick where every vehicle is going to transcend into deity status, but if you play them well and you know how to play your Swedish heavy tanks, yeah, you're still going to be able to pull off a few bangers. Anyway, ladies and gents, boys and girls, that was it for today. Hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, give it a thumbs up. If you hated it, give it a thumbs down. And let me know in the comments if you're still playing Swedish heavy tanks and what do you think about the nerfs? Were they too much or were they too little? Do you think the game's in a better state for it? And as always, thank you so much for watching. You've been epic and hopefully I'll see you soon.